Laura and I, from Frankie Green and Webb, we work with organisations to help them design and improve their digital experiences. We particularly specialise in mobile for the cultural sector. And this is the type of paper, Listening to Visitors, Research Findings about Mobile Content. First, a little bit of a confession. This session isn't about mobile, it's about audio guides. And we use the title because I think we've started to rebrand audio guides as mobile now, but actually this is really very much about talk about audio guides. And the reason we kind of had to start reframing audio guides to mobile is because I think audio guides have kind of started to be seen as the problem child of digital interpretation. They're a bit of a pain, they can be difficult to manage, and they tend to have a reputation of being quite expensive at the same time. And that's kind of how I was seeing it when I was putting this presentation together. Our partner, Alyson, who's not here today, she's like, no. They're not a problem child, they're an embarrassing parent. And this is my dad. This was the moment at my wedding where he stood up in front of all my friends and I disappeared behind the table in sheer terror about what he was going to tell them. He's wearing fake eyebrows because he thought made him look like George Clooney. So I'm going to come back to him very shortly. The other thing you should know is that I'm going to be talking about audio guide content. And because I'm talking about content, this is like the ubiquitous content is king slide. I have to say that term is starting to grind me down. I've heard it so many times really over the past few years that it no longer means anything. But as I was kind of putting this talk together, I started to think about what content is king is meant to be about. And it's meant to be about respecting content. It's meant to be about making valuable content. It's meant to be making content work hard. And hard-working content does mean valuable content. But what we've tended to look at is making valuable content. It's about making low-cost content. It's about making our content work hard by distributing it across multiple platforms. And here's what the kind of the problem child or the embarrassing parent has a few issues to deal with. Because it's quite difficult to transfer audio guide content to multiple platforms. That's quite a kind of provocative statement to make, but I truly, truly believe it. And kind of the research that we've been doing is showing us more and more. Kind of the way that, here's why I think that there's a problem transferring audio guide content onto multiple platforms. And it's really about, if you think about it in terms of a movie, if you watch a film, the audience is this fixed point, this yellow spot here. The weird physics symbol, that's about all your story in front, behind the screen is being told by moving those objects around. Your director's moving the content. You can change the size, the location of the screen, and the shape of it. It's not going to make much difference to that content. That content is not going to lose much meaning by putting it somewhere else. And here's the same kind of thought in terms of audio guides. With audio guides, the experience is created by putting the viewer in the scene and moving them around the story, moving them around to make the meaning. It's not really that easily transferable because the content has to be designed to work intimately with the physical space. It's an incredibly unique experience that doesn't really happen in many places apart from in museums right now. That could change. But I think it's something to remember that that's actually quite a unique, valuable thing that we do. So, that kind of embarrassing parent, it turns out that they're not really that great at being low cost and actually distributing them on multiple platforms is a bit of an issue too. But what if we looked about having value in content as the kind of thing that Rob was talking about, which is impact? What about if actually we were talking about big impact, making a big impact on engagement and understanding? Do that, those kind of little embarrassing parent, does audio guides deliver on that matter? So this kind of brings us to where we work, which is working with the National Gallery in 2012-13, working with Charlotte Sexton, who was the then head of digital media. She wanted to understand whether or not audio guides were delivering on impact, and whether or not they needed to refresh that 40 hours of content that they had access to. Peter Samis has just realised 40 hours of content, refreshing it. You know, we're not like wiping its face and kind of shoving it out the door. that's a real amount of work and amount of effort that you've got to put into doing it. So a bit of a backstory about that 40 hours of content. It kind of came from one of those introductions of a new technology where the sky was the limit on the amount of content that you could put on your CD-ROM. And that was said to be able, you're going to be able to do as much as you wanted. And a ton of the content was produced really super quick to kind of get it out the door. They used any narrator they could get a hold of, really. They kept it low cost. They didn't have an interpretation strategy that delivered for that, and they didn't have testing in the gallery as they were creating it. There was also a big bunch of new content that kind of had an editorial team attached to it, and they'd actually sat and thought about what they wanted the experience to be in the gallery. We kind of wondered if the visitor could really spot the difference. Charlotte wanted to understand the value of the guide to the visitor experience, but she also wanted to be able to articulate it internally. She needed to bring people on board to actually help her deliver it, and she wanted to be able to say whether or not it was working, where they needed to put the money into the value of this actual experience. Was this embarrassing parent really, really embarrassing? We set about evaluating the content, but we knew that Charlotte would also need to have content design principles because she was going to have to articulate to people about what made great quality visitor experiences through their content. We thought there was definitely an opportunity to understand if audio guides work, but more importantly, we wanted to understand the principles of making that audio guide content work. So we had to recruit visitors before they visited. Mainly because we were going to ask for an hour and a half of their time, and hijacking a tourist from Trafalgar Square and saying we're going to take over your experience for the next 2 hours wasn't an option. We then gave them an audio guide, and we had chosen specific content that related to the styles and techniques that we wanted to test, kind of what was important to the visitor. We developed a series of structured questions, so they had like a little sheet that they kind of went round with, and they could fill in certain boxes to capture what their gut instinct was, their moment in front of the painting, what did that matter and mean to them. And finally, we interviewed them about the overall experience. We recruited them via Facebook. One side of that is that we ended up with really passionate National Gallery fans, but we also ended up with a huge group of people who actually had never taken an audio guide. Some of them had taken a few, but nothing in the National Gallery, so they were in for a surprise. And so the question was, do audio guides work? As part of the quant study, we actually just asked them what they felt their impact was. We asked users what the guide had led them to do. Was it less, more, the same? They actually reported no negative impacts. We did question them if there was any negative impacts. Over 80% of the users reported the tour as having led them to enjoy their visit more, kind of quite an overarching one. But actually, 3/4 of the participants reported that they learned more and they discovered about art more. That's kind of core learning objectives for the National Gallery. These are kind of some of the quotes, and everything you see in speech bubbles is from quotes from the actual audience. We also heard from visitors how the experience of listening to audio helped them apply they increased their skills, they increased the amount of looking, they actually knew that that was happening, and they increased their confidence to look between different objects. And they also, what was interesting for us was they were able to apply that knowledge to other works of art. They felt that they owned that insight. What was most interesting for me was this kind of visitors really enjoyed listening to audio in front of the objects. This group of people who'd never taken audio guides were like, this is a brilliant experience, why didn't you tell me this was available? It's only in the front desk as you walk through the door. And so actually one of the big realizations was just like I realized with my embarrassing dad. As he stood up, he told an amazing story, and he captured everybody, and he did an amazing speech, and I hadn't realized that he was a fantastic public speaker, even though he was wearing fake eyebrows. And so like all of us, kind of, as you become that embarrassing parent, you suddenly appreciate that actually there is a value in this, there's skills there that this person has that nobody else has, and qualities that nobody else has. Kind of, that's something that we can use those audio guides for, looking and using audio. So what are the principles that make great content for video visitors? There is a huge body of literature on audio guides available in lots of different locations, but there's a surprising small amount of data on actually when it comes to content design. The overall insight was that visitors appreciated quality. The visitors really nailed it when they talked about content quality. They could spot stuff that didn't work immediately. That stuff that had been created really quickly, cheaply, hadn't been thought about, that experience. They could smell it. It was really, really apparent to them. But they could also see qualities in the elements of the old stuff that had been done. But there was stuff that they loved. Now, I don't for 1 minute think anybody sets off to go kind of, yeah, I'm going to create some mid-quality content or some really bad content. That's my objective for today. But what was really interesting is that the visitors have a voice over content. Just as many of us have in your organisation will have a different understanding of what quality is, or quality of visitor experience is. It turns out that so do our visitors in terms of the quality of experience design that they're looking for. So this is where it all gets a bit loosey-goosey for me, because I realised about talking about audio guide content, sometimes we'll all have different visions in our head of what that actually means. So I wanted to just give you a quick sample of what a stock of content that kind of followed some of the good quality principles that these visitors recognise, kind of transferred through into an actual audio guide stock. So somebody who's talking about testing, I haven't actually tested if this works yet, but I'm going to give it a go. So this is the Mars Venus by Botticelli, and this is a stock from the National Gallery Grand Tour.
It's a triumph for Venus. She's looking at him with kind of serene, with lack of emotion. I mean, she's conquered Mars through her appeal, through her beauty. It represents the victory of love over war. Mars is the god of war, of course, so the fact that he's been overcome by love to the extent that somebody can even blow a shell horn into his ear and he doesn't wake up. All these little satyrs, half animal, half human, represent the sort of sexual beastly side of man. They play with his enormous pipe and fiddle around with his armour. It was probably commissioned to decorate somebody's bedroom. And I think one of the reasons was because she's very beautiful, and so is he. And one of the ideas that people had in the Renaissance was that if you looked at something that was really beautiful, you might conceive a child that was really beautiful. What makes this picture remarkable, what Botticelli was so brilliant at, was making a picture which was very, very serious, had a deeply profound moral content, but at the same time did it in a way that was seductive and beautiful, that people would laugh and enjoy the picture on a whole variety of levels. I do think Botticelli had a nice time painting this post-poetical master.
So from that kind of clip, I just want you to keep that in mind when I'm describing what we're talking about, and look at how those principles have been applied in some of those areas. So these are some content design principles from the visitor. Principle number 1, information is important, but meaning is more important. This is not a medium that's about information. Totally. It's kind of more about the idea of understanding what is actually you're actually looking at, getting that context, finding out opinions, provoking and challenging people to think. When we think about delivering information, and I think one of the challenges we face is that we see audio guides as a mechanism for delivering information, we totally reframe what that experience is meant to be about for the visitor. For that visitor, this tool is about delivering meaning. And they were quite clear about where that kind of meaning came from and where they saw value in it. The second principle is about choosing a style of content that matches your resources and skills. Visitors don't have a preference for a particular style. We kind of expected them to say, I love interviews, or they would say, I really, really didn't like interviews because it was too much opinion. But actually, that's not what we saw. What we saw is they didn't have a preference for particular styles. They liked interviews, they liked archival, they liked debate and conversation. In fact, what they did say was, we really like the mixed approach that we'd taken by pulling this research together. But whatever the style of the production, if the production is done badly, what they recognised was that if the narrator had phoned in, that the interview editors felt a little bit forced, the production becomes a real distraction and it sits in front of the content. They weren't able to focus on the content, the production had become a distraction. Principle number 3 is that respect this is a really personal, intimate experience. Audio is a personal, intimate experience by definition, but actually what you expect is some level of social norms. Things like introducing the person speaking, why should I listen to you, why are you important? Addressing their needs first, so if it's a narrative-based painting, they wanted to understand the story behind the painting. That was the only question that they had, and if you try and give them a huge, beautiful soundscape, when all they were thinking is, but what does the painting actually show me? You couldn't get past that. Choose a voice that matches your organisational brand voice. They were really had a fine-tune that this doesn't sound like somebody who would work with the National Gallery or be part of the National Gallery. Actually, we focus very much on what our visual branding looks like. Very few organisations have an idea of what their voice would sound like. Although if you ask most people, they do say David Attenborough. Principle number 4 is make the time in front of the object count. Visitors link perception of time to how engaging and entertaining the content was. They could listen to a stop that was 1.5 minutes of very entertaining, beautiful content, and they would be left wanting more. And they could also listen to a stop of 1.5 minutes and that was really boring content, and all they wanted it to do was end. So it turns out that visitors saying something was actually too short is totally a compliment. But what it doesn't actually mean was that you should make any more content than you've actually given them. Give it a little bit of a taste of leaving wanting more. Connect the experience to the space. One of the things that is about that idea of you creating an elegant experience within an intimate relates to the design of the space is that you can create something that connects the experience with what they're feeling. Visitors can recognise when an experience has been created mobile. There are certain differences in how you direct somebody when you're stood in front of them versus when you're sat at writing stuff down at a desk. So actually, one of the ways to look at it is how can your processes reflect that experience. Look about drafting content actually inside the gallery with the curator through audio. What would that person say to you if they stood in front of that work? So these are the audio guide design principles that came from the research. I don't think we should be looking at them as a set of commandments. Just like any good principles, they should be broken, but they should be broken intelligently, knowing what the compromise is that you're making, knowing what the impact on the overall experience will be. Because if we can look at those principles, actually you can learn to answer some of these questions about how hardworking is our content, is it delivering big impact? But more importantly, we can start to answer questions about, okay, we need to make this content more low cost and we need to give it to a larger audience. And we can start to think about what those compromises are that we're taking. So one of the statements that we see across the board, and I have to say, the next bit of research I'm doing, I'm definitely going to try and nail whatever this means, but a lot of people say, I want to go at my own pace, and I'm not entirely sure when you unpack that what a visitor actually means. But what we've tended to do in the past is turn what was a linear experience into a random access tour, because if people want to go at their own pace, they want to access content in their own order. But actually when you do that, you compromise on a principle that is really actually quite important to them, which is make time in front of this object count. And so what you tend to do when you make things random access is you don't know which order they listen to things in, so you have to tell them a bit of background information everywhere they go. We just saw that actually background information is not the kind of the core of what they're wanting, it's not the meat. So what about if we look at it differently and said, actually what they're saying is, I don't want to be stuck in front of an object for what feels like the end of time. If you look at that, actually the solution then is the exact principle that we've been talking about, which is make time in front of the object count. So actually, then it becomes really about selling this engagement to them, because that's the most important thing to them. So you're going to enjoy deeper engagement that makes your experience fly by. Or what about if we take a technical issue? So a lot of people are looking at to move to bring your own devices for a very good reason. But actually what we see is that a lot of visitors don't have their headphones with them, so they don't access audio content. So So we've seen some choices made which is about delivering content via text. And again, there's suddenly a reduction in the amount of looking. That very core of what's made an audio guide experience important in terms of delivering meaning has been lost. I don't think it's, I don't think it's a major thing that you can't describe content by text, but you've got to understand the impact that that's going to have on your visitor and either adjust the content to fit that need or make roads into thinking about how you're going to transfer meaning. Or really ask yourself, is bring your own device the medium for delivering audio guides? That's a whole different presentation too. But also understanding the content principles was kind of one of those areas where we suddenly realized that actually we had a real opportunity, because we're more interested in the kind of the service design of an audio guide, kind of what are the points where you get this experience actually delivered to visitor, that why didn't you tell me about this experience moment? And actually what we tend to do is when you're pushed for time because you're getting the product at the door, you go, oh yeah, we need to do marketing. Okay, download the app. Yeah, download the app. Or, would you like an audio guide? I don't know how many people have been asked that as they walk into an exhibition. Or, have you tried our iPod Touch tour? Actually, the technology is not the bit that's delivering the experience for the visitor. The content is the stuff that's delivering for the visitor. And actually what you see is, I have to say these are all stolen from the people in the research. They were the way that they described the experience. And if you're looking for great marketing, asking people how they would describe an experience is a great way to steal ideas. But they need to feel what it's like. Someone said, I finally know what it feels like to be inside the painting. Who doesn't want to deliver that moment to somebody? Or I was totally surprised by what you can see when you look beneath the layers. I think all of those, looking at how we market that experience, is much more important. So what were our takeaways? Use audio guides for what they deliver well. I'm not suggesting by any means that everybody should deliver an audio guide, because you'll have great impact, but I think they're a tool and you know what they can do, then you can use them at the right moment with the right budget at the right time. Focus on delivering meaning over information. The core of what an audio guide was a meaning delivery mechanism, not this information delivery mechanism that we keep referring it to. And understand what makes your content valuable to the experience of the visitor. And that process point, start mobile and stay mobile. As much as you can do in the gallery or in front of the artwork with a human being, that's the point that it makes a difference. If you're looking to prototype with content just as much as you do with user experience design. That's a lot. Thank you very much.